You got it.
All right. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Power Talk. This is Adrienne. I am your host, and we're going to have an exciting show today because we're going to be talking about our dreams and about where we go at night once we close our little peepers and settle into whatever we settle into. My guest today is a lovely woman by the name of Clementine Marie Giovannetti, and she has written a book, The Best-Selling Guide to Spiritual Interpretation of Your Dreams. So, without further ado, welcome, Clementine.
Hi, thank you, Jane. It's a pleasure to be with you today.
So how did you get started in playing in the dream world?
I incarnated.
Well, you sound like me. I'm Pisces with Pisces rising, and all of that stuff is in the 12th house, on my chart, which is all about that dream world. So I do all my processing when I sleep.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I was born definitely with the gift of sight. I was wide awake. I was definitely in an awakening soul. And it definitely was an interesting childhood. I guess that's the best way to call it. Yeah. And from as young as 2-3 years old, Jean, I realized that there was two of me. Because at night we go to sleep, right? And then all of a sudden, one particular night at such a young age, I found myself actually just being able to, the second me, the ghost-like spirit self, actually able to just lift off and rise out of my body. And when I did that, next thing you know, I was up at the ceiling and I'm looking down at myself, sound asleep with my little teddy bear. And I'm like, wait a minute, how did I do that? Did I do that? There's two of me. And then I entered within what I call the dream world. So from a young age, I was very much consciously aware that there was the physical me, the human aspect of me, and then there was the spiritual self of me, the astral body. And at nighttime, no mom and dad had to tell me to go to bed. I couldn't wait to go to bed because I found that world to be so freeing, like I could basically just be who I really was, a soul. And I love flying, as well in my dream state. So it occurred really at a very, very young age. And I really kind of figured that this was like a normal process. This is what incarnated souls did, when they went to sleep at night, and like they were even lucid and conscious about their abilities, right, to enter into the dream world and the astral planes and could have out-of-body experiences, but they weren't aware at all. Most people, when they go to sleep at night, they're tired, right? They just want to hit the pillow and that's enough. They turn off the TV literally inside of themselves. And, when they wake up in the morning, they're really like, oh, I had this dream last night, and they really can't figure it out. And they also don't connect it with themselves, that this, in fact, is a communication that they do have, an ability they have, obviously, within themselves to communicate on a higher level, a higher consciousness, on the soul consciousness level. And so henceforth, I became a dream interpreter publicly at around 17 years of age. I was a journalist. I was kind of like a closet intuitive, a closet spiritualist, because I was born in 1955, Jean. And by the way,
honey, you're just a baby.
Yeah. By the way, you notice I'm incarnated in a girl's body. So you can imagine back in the 50s, girls being intuitive and talking about out-of-body experiences and, astral planes and, communicating with loved ones who had passed on. And mom and dad were Roman Catholics. So, that was interesting too. That added a little mix to the, incarnation as a little girl. So basically on a professional level, humanly, I just became a journalist. I found that fascinating. But, the guy, and it was predominantly, it was all men in the journalistic field back in the 60s and 70s, and had an interesting voice, so when I came in, so I had a lot of opportunities to do radio voiceovers and different things like that. But, one day, one of the guys that I met that had a radio show, said, I want to put you on the air. And I'm like, why? And he said, I know about you. And I went, what do you mean about about me, And he said, no. He said, I know about you. I know what you can do. And he put me on a 50,000 watt radio station. I mean, cold like that. And, you know, he had like 16 phone lines and all these people started calling, and I'm like, and now what am I supposed to do? And next thing you know it, I really realized that I really had the ability, the gift to go there and interpret other people's dreams. That's how I became a dream interpreter. Yeah.
That's really cool. You know, I mean, I have very vivid, lucid dreams every night, several times a night, probably hundreds of times a night, but I probably only remember maybe 1, 2, 3 a night. But I do remember them, and I do remember them quite clearly. But mine are a bit different in that I've never had one of those out-of-body astral travel experiences consciously.
Really?
Yeah, I just
Not
have
that you're aware of anyway.
exactly. I just have these really vivid dreams. I mean, for years, I dreamed episodes of the sitcom Friends, and I was always in the middle of it, you know, with those friends, you know, and mine were so much better than what the writers were putting out on the TV station. I'm thinking, God, if I had a way to contact them, you know, their ratings would go through the roof because mine are so good, you know. So that was always kind of interesting to me. I also, for a while, had very lucid dreams where I was connecting with Princess Diana, some before she passed, some after she passed. And she would come to me for advice, you know, and I thought that was kind of interesting. Didn't really totally understand where that was coming from, but yeah.
Well, on us, you know, at the end of the day, you know, put the dream world just aside for a minute. We are spiritual beings. Done deal. You know, now I know there's a whole group of the masses that will still want to discuss that.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Right. But we're spiritual beings having that earthly experience. And, you know, the dream world is just one more aspect of our spiritual and soul's abilities. And being as souls, we are able to leave our body at any time that we want. And we are able to connect with other souls on that astral plane and communicate with them. You know, I think one of the common dreams that a lot of people have shared with me over the year is loved ones who have passed on as well. And then all of a sudden, you know, there they are. And it's kind of like even a social gathering, you know, they might even be sitting down to have a meal and they're picking up exactly where they left off before that person actually transitioned, right? And I don't like to use the word death because death is a myth. We don't die, we just transition.
Right.
And our body expires. That has an expiration date, but we don't have an expiration date. And then long and behold, you know, there they are and they pick up where they left off and they're talking about, you know, the grandson's graduation day or somebody's up and coming expecting a baby. And then when that soul, that individual who is still connected permanently to a human body, the umbilical cord hasn't been severed in any way, they come back into their conscious physical awake state and they're almost like shivering. They're like, whoa, you know, I was just with my mom or dad or my grandparents and it felt so real. And what I find just so amazing is like, it was real.
Yeah.
You were there. You were just temporarily like dead. You were out of your body and you connected with loved ones who have passed on, that permanently left their body, and you found them on the astral plane. And this totally eradicates the whole element of what death is all about and what life after death is all about. But unfortunately, and that's why, you know, I just celebrated my 63rd birthday. I'm still teaching. I'm still talking about this after all these years. And I started at 17 years of age because unfortunately, our human formal education process, where does it talk about this? Where is there a class about, you know, dream interpretation, right? Or out of body?
It doesn't, you know, and, but, you know, it goes back in history. I mean, you know, one of the most, well, not the most famous stories, but a very famous story in the Bible, several of them actually have to do with dream interpretation. You know, Joseph ending up being the administrative assistant of the Pharaoh because he interpreted Pharaoh's dreams. Daniel interpreting the dreams of Nebuchadnezzar. So, I mean, this you
Yeah,
know, this stuff
this is
goes
part
back.
of our design. It's the package deal.
Yeah.
It's our
Mhm.
software, when we come in incarnated in a human body. But what I refer to as the matrix or the artificial reality, they don't go there, and they don't want us to go there. They don't
Right.
want us to be in touch or be aware of our God-given spiritual abilities, of what in fact we are able to do. And so the two particular individuals you mentioned that are recorded in the Bible, they had prophetic dreams. They were remote viewers. They
Mhm.
were actually able to travel remotely out of their bodies, see where the enemy was coming from and how many of them were. I mean, they were actually able to bring this information back. Why have we lost this art, this ability? Why aren't we teaching our children how to do this and letting them know, by the way, you're equipped with this. This is
You know,
your ability that you have, right? We need
well,
to have
some organizations do. For many years, I was a Rosicrucian, and the
right,
Rosicrucians teach that. You know,
right.
they teach it
Absolutely.
at a very deep level. So there is that possibility. I had a client ask me a question, I think about 3 weeks ago now, that she had had a dream where she was communicating with this guy that she wants to have a relationship with. And she said, in this dream, we were like together, and it felt really good and it was perfect. She said, did I just make that up? And I said, sweetie, everybody thinks the dream world is the dream world and the real world isn't. I said, but
It
in my reality, the dream world is the real world. Of
absolutely.
course you didn't make it up.
And the first 2 chapters or 3 chapters of my book, The Best-Selling Guide to Spiritual Interpretations of Your
Mm-hmm.
Dreams, it's exactly what I state in the book, is that when you're asleep or you view yourself as being asleep, that's when you are awakened.
Right.
That's when you're awakened. And when you come back into your physical being and this physical frequency, the third dimension, you're asleep.
Mm-hmm.
And you're just functioning on a robotic level. And the physical dimension is the mirror of what is taking place on the spiritual dimension. So everything begins in spirit first. Everything begins with thought, right? And then with our emotions. The emotions are the motivation behind that. So people are just so disconnected and severed. And that's why I was so delighted to come on your show, because I'm just going to keep on and keep on. Wake up.
Yeah.
Remember who you are and what your abilities are. And we need to flip this concept of your paradigm in your mind. You are first soul and spirit, and you are most awakened and alive in the spiritual planes where there is no death. And also that there is not the illusions of what's your skin color, what's your race, if you're rich or poor, if you're gay or straight. I mean, these are just man-made illusions on the third dimension. That's all they are. So in the spiritual realm, and I want to give me the opportunity to share that. A lot of my clients as well and students, most of them are women. And a girl also shared with me, she just met somebody, through one of these online dating sites, whatever. And I've always told them, take your time, don't engage in sexual activity. I'm old-fashioned kid, right? But take your time, because you really don't know what their intention is. And you also should find out where their soul frequency is at. I mean, it's not about, oh, he looks really good in jeans, or
Yeah.
look at the car he's driving, right? I mean, that's just all matrix illusionary stuff. You really need time to get to know where that soul is and what's his evolution? Where is he in his reincarnation and evolution as well, now incarnated in a human body? And the best way to find out somebody's true core and their soul and what their intention is in a relationship potentially is at nighttime. You spend some time with them in the astral plane, you really do. Now, one of my clients recently, it was about 3 or 4 months ago, met someone and, they were dating, and he was becoming more sexually aggressive in the physical dimension. And she kept on saying, no, no. And the next thing you know she's sound asleep at night, and he appears in her so-called dreams in her bedroom. And now he's attempting to actually sexually assault her because he was like, hey, I want what I want. She so startled, she woke up so violated and just traumatized with that feeling like, he just raped me. I mean, it felt that real. And so when we had our next session, I go, he did. It doesn't matter if he did it with his human body or without his, and he did it with his astral body. And she said, but how is this possible? Well, you know, most guys aren't awakened. Most souls, for whatever reason, I don't know why, it's just a thing, but most souls that incarnate in male gender bodies, they just like to stay in the matrix, you know, and they will never acknowledge what we are talking about. It's very limited amount of men that will acknowledge our discussion today. But yet, just because they won't acknowledge it or validate it or give it credit, they're the first ones to take advantage of their abilities as a soul or a spiritual being. And what he couldn't get in the physical frequency, there he was in dream world. He got it. And immediately she says, well, what do? I go, you just found out everything you wanted to know about him.
Yeah. Kiss him goodbye.
Yeah. Show him the door. And so it is the real world. The dream world is our real.
I agree. And it's just like a pair of shoes. You go to the shoe store and you try on some shoes and they don't feel good. Well, they're not going to feel better once you get them home and quote unquote break them in. That's an illusion as well. But the same thing goes, you know, if you've had that kind of an experience, you've learned what you need to know. The shoes don't feel good, so I don't need to take those babies home, you know?
And everybody has symbols that they collect along the way. You know, it's, you know, in the old days, you used to talk about, well, keep a dream journal, you know, by the side of your bed. And
I do that, actually.
Right. And as soon as you wake up, you know, then go ahead and then write everything down. All right, that's great. There's nothing wrong with that at all. But I want to add an extra bonus of what else that you can do as well to help yourself. Keeping a journal for you of what you saw, and date it, definitely date it, especially if you're having premonitions, right? If you're having deja vus. I mean, some of the premonitions that people will have is a loved one. This happened recently. It was someone that they were recently engaged to a gentleman, and then the relationship didn't work out. And then that gentleman married somebody else. And they didn't have human contact, this girl and this guy, previous ex-fiance. They didn't have communication for like 20 years or so with each other. And then all of a sudden she's sound asleep and there he is in her dream and he's waving goodbye. He's waving goodbye. And he didn't look like you would look like if you added 20, 25 years. He looked just exactly like when they had first met on the human plane, right? She was so like, something's wrong. He came again in another vision to her and told her he loved her and that basically he was going to be waiting for her on the other side. Aww. Then she knew she had to do something. She contacted his wife and she said, you know, she was a little taken back that this ex-fiance would call her. And, you know, it was a human thing. And, you know, she said, well, I just, you know, I had these two visions of him and, you know, I didn't know what else to do. And I just wanted to reach out. And she found out that he was in the hospital when she called and she spoke to the wife. And the wife refused. The wife would not let this girl talk to her ex-fiance. I don't think it was just a matter of days or like a week. The wife called the ex-fiance and said he had just passed over.
Well, you know, I guess just before Christmas, I recently moved to Tallahassee, Florida from the North Georgia mountains. And when I got down here, I found out that my first cousin was going through terminal stages of cancer. And so I spent the last 6 weeks of her life visiting her a lot, talking to her about spiritual things, even to the point of giving her energetic information on how to actually make her transition energetically.
Right, exactly. Not to be afraid, not to fear death, not to fear the transition. Exactly.
And so one night I had been with her on a Sunday, and that night I woke up out of a deep sleep and I felt somebody squeeze my hand at 4 a.m. And I was like, oh, Hannah just made her transition.
Yeah.
And sure enough, I was wide awake at that point. I got up, made myself coffee, started doing my things that I do, in the morning. And at 6 a.m., I got a text from her older sister telling me that at 4 a.m. that she had made her transition. So she did come visit me.
And that was wonderful. What a gift that they, and even if they don't know how to do these things, right, while they're incarnated, even if these spiritual gifts and abilities are natural soul's design, even if they look at it, from like a religious point of view or a taboo point of view, right? It's amazing when the souls transition or about to transition, because some of them have near-death experiences. My father, my earth father, many years ago, I had left home when I was 10 years of age because of my gifts and abilities and I was 10 years of age when I left. And because of my awakened gifts and abilities, it was way too much for my earthly parents to deal with. And so the only way they knew to deal with it was to beat it out of me. That was, they were Roman Catholics and they were Italians, and I was a little girl, and I'm like, what are you talking about? All these things that I was able to do, and that I would come to the kitchen table and go, oh God, you know what I did last night? Or you know where I went last night? No, too much for,
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, little mom and dad from Italy. And so long and behold, I hadn't seen my mom and dad, I don't know, 20 some years, 25 years, 30 years. And by this time I was already established, as an intuitive and a healer in my work. And one night my father showed up at the foot of my bed, and I was living in Miami at the time. And he just looked at me and he looked down at his lungs, and I went, those Pall Mall cigarettes finally caught up with you, right? Because he had lung cancer. And I said, so you're going to die. Your body's going to die. You're going to transition. And he asked me for forgiveness and asked me to come see him at the hospital. It was pretty severe because my earth father had sexually assaulted me as well many times as a child. So, we hadn't talked and we hadn't had any visitations at all, even on the astral plane up until that point over 20 some years. So it wasn't like, okay, yeah, sure, I'm ready to forgive you. So he had to make 3 visitations to me at the foot of my bed before I finally said, okay. And then I agreed to go see him. And the funniest thing, I remembered as a little kid where the Italians would lay out, the people that had died, the funeral, right? And so I did a little research, and I found the name of it in Chicago, Illinois, where I'm originally from. And I called him, and the guy answered the phone, and I said, is Mr. Andrew Giovannetti there? And the phone just kind of went clunk, clunk, clunk. And he finally came back on the phone, and I said, is Mr. Andrew Giovannetti there? And he's like, who is this? And I went, that doesn't matter. Just tell me where he is right now. And he said, well, he's not here now, but we're expecting him. Oh, okay. What hospital is he at? And then he told me. So I went ahead. Now imagine, my family member having talked to me, communicated with me, nothing in a long time. Now, long and behold, I decide to go ahead and fulfill his last basically dying wish on earth in that body and that personality. And I went ahead and I'm traveling to Miami International. All of a sudden my room, my whole car was filled with flowers. And so I said, okay, I'll send him flowers. And I kind of got the feeling like I'm not going to make it in time, right, for his transition. And so long and behold, call the floors, send the flowers. I love you. I forgive you. Everything that I knew he needed. It's set. I'm getting on a plane. I get to Chicago, get to the hospital, and now I'm on the floor. The elevator's doors open up, and I'm on the floor, and I'm walking down the hallway. And all these Italians, you know how dramatic Italians can be. They're all running out of the room. He had transitioned right at that moment. But the amazing thing is when they saw me walking down the hallway, the girl that they had beaten almost to death to get this gift out of me, and that they hadn't seen and had no human contact with for 25 years. Can you even imagine what they were thinking? Like, how did she even know? How could she have possibly even showed up? So as they were all flying all over the hallway, I walked into my father's hospital room, and he was alone except for a nurse, and there was my flowers, and my flowers were right on top of his chest. And so I said, I was asking about this, right? And so she said, well, who are you? And I said, well, I'm his daughter, right? And her eyes just kind of lit up and I went, oh, they've been talking about me. Well, I kind of figured that. So anyway, the story was he was in a coma while he was visiting me, asking me for forgiveness and to come and see them. And while he was in a coma, my flowers arrived after our little, encounters together 3 times. And when the flowers arrived, he awakened out of his coma. And They do this. And he sat up in bed and he read the little card and it said, I love you and I forgive you and so forth like that. And tears came down his eyes. And he looked around at every family member that was around, because now he had just come out of a coma, right? It was like a miracle. And he never said a word to anybody, never. He looked at each one of them and with my flowers in his hands, he transitioned and he left. And that was the exact moment I walked in. And the biggest thing was my mom, my brother, my aunt, my uncle, everybody was like, how did you know this? How did you even know that this was happening? People are so disconnected to their true, genuine self and all the abilities that God has given us of how we can communicate with each other and stay in contact. I mean, this is great to do Zoom, but we obviously have a lot of other abilities even before Zoom came into play.
For sure that, and I had an epiphany just this morning, actually. I'd had a dream. I used to have these dreams a lot about, going back into the corporate world. I've been retired for a good number of years, and a lot of times they're frustrating and, I can't get stuff done and this, that, and this one wasn't like that so much. And as I woke up this morning, I realized that a lot of times when I have those kinds of dreams, that what I'm doing is I am recreating in another dimension a higher vibrational way of handling the stuff that I didn't handle as appropriately as I could have.
In the past.
Yeah.
Right, Jean. You did the best that you could at that time based upon your evolution and your conscious awakening. And, a lot of people are really puzzled when they have dreams on a reoccurring basis from their past, like when you're at school or like when it's at a job. And in the dream state, it's like you're almost experiencing like a paralysis. You're not in control. You're not in charge. You're trying to grab something and it just kind of gets away from you. You're trying to speak, the voice isn't coming out. You're lost and confused. It's like, where's my classroom? I don't know where my classroom is. And a lot of the older individuals that will call me on a show will say, look, I'm 50 years old or 60 years old. Why am I still dreaming about when I was in high school? And how come I can't find the classroom anymore? Well, the subconscious, records everything. The subconscious mind records everything that we experience, both in a body, out of body. It doesn't matter if it's on the 3rd frequency, what dimension we go to, in the out of body state, in the astral plane. Subconscious is there, just a nonstop recording machine. And when we're incarnated and we had a very traumatic or kind of challenging experience, let's say when we were a younger person, like you were in the corporate world, and let's face it, it's overwhelming, especially when you go from high school or college and now you're entering into the business world, and especially as a woman and you're outnumbered, by 1 to 10 of guys, right? And you're trying to perform and maybe you don't have as much of self-esteem or much as confidence, right? And it's a learning process, right? We're just evolving as we go to find ourselves, right? And long and behold, that moment is recorded. The subconscious and your higher consciousness is viewing that going, this is a moment I need to definitely it's like, popular on YouTube. It's like a featured video, a part of your life. And then as you progress and you start having similar situations as you progress in your earth life, and you have that dream and you're like, why am I experiencing this paralysis again? Why am I? Because it's a reflection. You're at that same level again. This is new, new challenges, new growth, and you're trying to figure it all out for yourself again. And the best thing is to have the strength and the confidence again, obviously, rise above all these challenges and
For
to get
sure.
back in control of yourself, right?
Well, this has been really fun, and we have run out of time. Listeners and viewers, don't forget to grab a copy of Clementine Marie's book. It's the best-selling guide to spiritual interpretation of your dreams. And you know what? I'd like to have you back on the show because we just scratched the surface. I'd love to talk about symbolism.
Sure.
You know, so I will get in touch with you and we will figure that out.
All right, Jean.
And so viewers, until next time, remember, people who take responsibility for their lives create the reality they desire. Ciao.